He had a hornet infestation in his attic that took up the whole roof and just let them stay because they would sting PPL that came close to his house. I grew up next door to this elderly couple, Bill and Kathy. Bill apparently had 5 daughters who did not speak to him, and Kathy had a son whose wife was blind. After a couple of different babysitters fell through, my mom had us go over to their trailer and stay until my dad got home from work. They'd often just put me in this yellow bedroom and make me stay in there for hours while my brother got to watch TV and eat snacks and stuff. Their trailer was hot and had no air conditioning. They didn't open the windows, and it was suffocating at times. I was so happy when I hit 13 years old, and my mom told me I didn't have to go over there anymore if I didn't want to. My brother did, though. Kathy and Bill were always staring out their windows, too, directly at our house. It was unsettling. At any time, you could look out the window and see them looking right back at you. One day, my brother came home when Dad did, and he said, "Hey, Dad, Kathy says she wants you to cut the bushes because she can't see what's going on over at our house anymore." Kathy would come over from time to time and fill us in on the things going on in her life. She hosted a family from Mexico for a few days, and then her son died in a car accident. Everyone in the area felt so bad for her, they brought her food and gave her money and stuff. Eventually, Bill died of lung cancer, and Kathy moved into the apartments down the street. After several years, she became ill and died. While going through Kathy's things to prepare for the funeral, one of her friends found documentation that Kathy actually had several children, some of whom she'd given up for adoption. And the biggest shocker of them all, her son, showed up for the funeral. He was still alive. She'd told us all many years before that he'd been killed, but there he was. They'd only just gotten into a disagreement, and she told him he was dead to her. After college, I briefly lived in an apartment near the Capitol, and this was during a period when there were a lot of protests. My across-the-hall neighbor was all about his identity politics. He'd mount signs on his railing and door and always played his news choice so loud you could hear it in the hall. Well, I found out he'd host people who traveled to the Capitol to protest at his apartment. NBD, but I noticed almost exclusively he only hosted girls who couldn't have been any older than 18 to 19 years old. After about 3 weeks of this increased foot traffic, one night I awoke to someone crying in the hall. I opened my door and there was a partially dressed drunk teenager crying. I asked if she was okay, and she was barely able to communicate what had happened between sobs and drunkenness. I let her in and got her a shirt and offered to call the police, but she insisted that I not, but instead used my phone to call a friend to come help her. A 25-ish-year-old guy came, and I guess he was the organizer of a group from out of town that brought them there to protest, and she told him that the guy who hosted her got her drunk and tried taking advantage of her. He went over and confronted the guy, collected her things, and they left. The following week, there was a confrontation in the hall between my neighbor and 2 drunk teenagers making similar claims. Not too long after that, I woke up to my neighbor pounding on my door screaming for me to call the cops. One of the girls he was hosting pepper sprayed him. He said she tried to rob him, and she said he tried getting her drunk and touch her. I told the cops about the past occurrences and gave a statement. He moved out a month after that. We had this guy that walked the neighborhood constantly. You'd see him up and down the alleys, miles into town, always walking. I always got the feeling that he was a vet with PTSD. If anyone got close to his yard, he'd come out screaming at them, warning them to stay away, especially kids. The cops were called on him numerous times. Then he just kind of disappeared. Then one day I drove by his house and there was a hazmat team in his garage going through a practically brand new pickup that none of us had ever seen him drive. These guys were in the full getup, complete with breathers. It was crazy. A couple of weeks later, there were dumpsters parked in the driveway and workers were dismantling the inside of the house. They tossed out all of the appliances, toilets, sinks, plus all of his furniture, clothes, etc. The house wasn't even that old. Maybe 5 years. Tops. But they gutted it. I have no idea what happened to him. I'm assuming he killed himself inside the garage and they didn't find him for several weeks. That would explain the hazmat team. But it wouldn't explain them gutting the house like that. The creepiest part was when they had the garage door open. You could see it was filled with dozens of kids' bikes and toys. I moved into my GFS apartment for about 11 months, I think. This was about 3 decades ago. I met my neighbor who seemed relieved to hear I was installing alarm systems at the time, because she claimed that she had been robbed over 400 times in the past year. Yep, she said she was robbed more than once per day. She had called the cops so many times that they refused to come out anymore. In the course of our conversation, she went from being relieved that I might bring some stability to the neighborhood to thinking I would know how to defeat alarm systems. Not as if she had one to defeat, mind you, but that I generally was capable of it. From there, she convinced herself that I, personally, was the one robbing her more than once per day. We just met less than half an hour ago, mind you. The conversation ended with her threatening to kill me if she found even one footprint on her property. My GF and I was obligated to make a police report just in case something happened. We wanted it documented, and a cop had a short conversation with her. After that, we both tried really hard to ignore her ranting at us from inside her house. For context, this was the early 1980s when people like this were far less understood and tolerated. I was probably 13 years old. He was an average, accountant-looking white guy in his 40s, and he lived directly next door to me for a couple of years. He rarely left his house, and this was a time when work-from-home jobs just weren't a thing. He let the yard get pretty raggedy looking before he would cut it, and that was the only time we would see him outside except the occasional mailbox or trash can trip. Of course, we were respectful of the guy's wish for privacy, but we thought he was a little unsettling. No one visited him, and you could tell his car sat for long periods without being moved. Then, after 2 to 3 years, he got a girlfriend who had a daughter around my age, and I became friends with her. Eventually, she invited me into the neighbor's house after school one day when she was home alone. My neighbor was a massive, big-time postage stamp dealer. Like, he bought, sold, and traded them among collectors in significant volumes, all over the world through the mail. The house was full of them. They were in every room, out on most tables in some small piles, and many stacked boxes of them everywhere. He had a custom-built table that was totally covered with small cubby holes for sorting them. He was actually a really smart and interesting guy. Just sort of odd, probably on the spectrum in a time when that wasn't even thought of yet. Dude lives in the flat below me. I guess he sometimes does drugs at night because I hear him pacing around. Stuff shatters and he's kind of wailing. It's super scary sometimes, but when confronted about it the day after or so, he acts like nothing happened. Super sketchy guy in general. Was supposed to leave on July 1st. Is still there. My landlord now does some legal paperwork to get rid of him, and I can't wait. He's a pain in the ass and annoys me daily, but the wailing sounds are the worst. I left my abusive ex. I had money saved, and he attacked me in the last flat I had. I went to view another apartment and seen a nice one. 2-bed perfect for me, as was me AMD my daughter. I was moving stuff in and obviously had kid stuff. Had the neighbor come out, AMD ask if I needed help, then said, "Where's your daughter?" At the nanny's. Why? Oh, you don't need a nanny, I will watch her for free. I got a vibe. I rang the landlord. It never went through estate agents as I was paying cash. I said, "Is he a P** due?" He said no. But inside he is being inappropriate. I had a vibe. He was registered as a sex offender against minors a couple years later. I have a neighbor who, we found out, had a separate key to access our backyard, which obviously went down well with my parents when they found out. And he had this weird Asian fetish and also tended to look down on us, because my parents weren't familiar with the American system. Yeah, he eventually found out how absolutely terrifying Asian moms can be, especially a Korean ajumma. I haven't lived in that house for over a decade now, but apparently, my neighbor is so scared of my mom now, he communicates with my uncle to indirectly tell my mom something. There were several disputes that occurred, but it always ended with him losing, or one time, literally going to his room, LOL.